Thank you so very much for staying tuned. We have a lot in store for you. Yes, indeed. I'd like to welcome all of you to join us at the NetApp booth in all the breaks, because all you've got to do to win some amazing prizes is download their brochure and you will stand a chance to win yourself a Google Mini. Now, who wouldn't want that? What's more, we also have some very interesting lucky draws lined up for you at the NetApp booth, where you stand a chance to win a Blockhooked BTW Pro earbuds. So all you've got to do is meet and connect with the team at the NetApp booth. All set for our very interesting inaugural panel discussion on leveraging the data center and cloud to create new business frontiers across sectors. Moderating this very interesting panel is going to be Mr. Biswajit, Director, KPMG India. Joining us is our power-packed panelists. Right here we have with us Mr. Chirag, Boonlia, Group CTO, Embassy Group, Mr. Pradeep, Menon, Managing Director and Head, HSBC Technology India, Mr. Puneet, Gupta, Vice President, Sales, India and SAARC, NetApp. Let's welcome them all.
Hey, Isha, thank you. Thank you so much. It's great to see you again. It's been a while, and hopefully we'll all be seeing each other very soon in an actual room rather than in a virtual room. There are certain phrases that become a buzz that one hears consistently, right? And as a consultant, me and my tribe are many times guilty of coining many of those. And nowadays, many organizations usually describe their culture as being data driven. And I know many organizations whose stated ambition is to become the same. And many who are already at some stages of this journey. But if you look at it from the technology power that really powers this ambition, it's mostly the ABC, right, of data. And so obviously the algorithms, A of algorithms, B of big data, and C of cloud computing. And then while some opinions seem to think of these in three different silos, actually they have a very symbiotic relationship. You need lots of data, right? Preferably very varied and coming at you in actual time. You need the computational muscle to process it when you want it, right? Which means, there could be sporadic demands and peaks to be able to run all of this. And then, of course, this comes from the cloud and the new age data centers, because contrary to what some people believe, cloud platforms too actually operate out of data centers and not really clouds per se, right? And therefore, however, a lot of what we hear is just the shiny visible part of the iceberg, isn't it? I mean, underneath all of this, and I keep saying this, a large data ecosystem is equally a gold mine to be explored and discovered. As well as a ticking time bomb. If things can possibly go wrong, they will go wrong. That sort of a thing. Pradeep, I wanted to call in you first. Pradeep, while you head the technology center for HSBC in India, you also lead a very large global data team, and I'm sure both of us agree that it's a big tiger to grapple with, right? And the balance of decisions between one and the other, right? So whether it's the cloud, the data center, especially when it comes to technologies like AI, ML, new age analytics, right? I wanted to get a perspective on this data center versus cloud conversation that keeps happening.
Well, that realistically, first of all, before I get into that, I'd like, thank you. It's been great meeting you, Biswa. It's been a year since we met last. So thanks a lot for having me, and thanks to ET. Before I get into this take on data center versus cloud in the future, realistically, I don't think financial organizations will move over entirely to the public cloud for a host of reasons. We've been discussing this for years, right? Security, redundancy, regulation, all of them, those things, they remain. When we say public cloud, there's data centers. So it's not so much about data center versus the cloud as much as it's data center with and for the cloud. So that's the way I'd probably look at it. I'll give you a couple of quick examples, right? I mean, we have what we call a global social network analytics platform. that's been set up and deployed to better inform about our financial crime, inform our financial crime investigation teams about that. That particular platform uses AI and big data. It's run almost exclusively on-prem. In contrast to this on-prem approach, there's another application that helps ease call burdens on a policy experts to respond to questions internally, and that's built entirely off a public cloud platform. So for us, I think in the long run, I'm sure it's for other industries too. It's basically a horses for courses kind of an approach. I think public or private, depending upon what's the best fit for an application, for the use case that comes in, and so on. That's my take on this topic.
I like what you said, and also for Pradeep, in my opinion, right, for large financial organization, financial services organization, telcos, these were the first adopters of most data technology at whatever point of time. So what also happened is that a lot of the infrastructure to be able to churn massive amount of data had already been built at some point of time, whether data center, etc., right? And now doing it just because it's the thing to do doesn't make sense, doesn't make financial. So if you do the cost arbitrage versus capability of what incremental capability are you getting, it doesn't give you much. Yes, for an organization which is doing this net new, it makes sense. Or when you come to a time when you have to modernize the infrastructure, maybe then you can do it. But otherwise, it's just like you said, right? It's a horses for courses. And then, of course, heavily regulated industry. We're still a little gray on what we can, what we can't, and where will it go in the future. And that's one. And the other is, like you said, a lot of stuff we need to do on the edge today, right? And therefore, I think I agree with you. I think it's a with story more than an if and an or story, right? I will come back, Pradeep, because HSBC and you both have had a very interesting journey when it comes to what you did with the cloud and how you went about doing this. So I'm going to come back to you. I just, what I really like is this, how this entire thing has made a sea change to how we as users even individually use data, or even without realizing it, or how it's changing our everyday experiences, right? I think the best way for simile for me is how television viewing has changed for us, right? If you look at it over when I was young, I remember starting from a small fixed number of channels where choice of content was very little, as well as the schedule was very rigid. So much so that I remember while growing up, entire Sundays would be planned around the TV schedule, right? With the advent of cable and direct to home, the choice of content grew exponentially. But we still had to conform to a schedule to watch our favorite sitcoms. But today with streaming services, I mean, the choice is mind-boggling. You decide when you want to see it, but also you decide how you want to see it, which device you want to see it. And this is similar to what is happening in the data consumption world, right? Always on demand, democratized is the loud and clear ask from practitioners. And this very neatly brings me to you, Puneet. Puneet, I know we have spoken about this before. The pandemic has made you an OTT fan, right? And I'm sure you're enjoying the choices that you get out there nowadays, Puneet.
Yeah, absolutely right. I mean, I've really discovered a lot of amazing content on the OTT over the last about 18 months. And, some of it is like a documentary, some of it is like great shows, periodic stuff, current stuff. And both on Netflix and a whole lot of Indian, OTT platforms. So I think has been absolutely amazing. In fact, a lot of times when I talk to my team or, folks around me, I just pick so many examples from the OTT world, which kind of relate to real life or what we do, and they become very powerful analogies. So yeah, I've been a big fan of the OTT over the last 18 months. It's been has been absolutely amazing.
I think a lot of those similes creep into your, conversations with, even in business conversations. But to bring this back to what we hear from me, on the flip side of this very skyrocketing, obviously, digital story, right, is the fact that everything about the data ecosystem has changed. Who and how much data is being generated, what data is being generated, where is it being generated, where and how is it being stored and processed. I mean, everything, right? And NetApps, of course, has been a very central player in all of this. So I wanted to hear your views on how this on this and how NetApp is helping organizations navigate these challenges.
Yeah. So Biswa, let's go back a little in time, right? So the whole digital transformation story, the whole adoption of cloud is not anything new to most of us. Probably started a few years back. I think what the pandemic did was really accelerate this story. Now, the way we hear it from the analyst is like the amount of data that's getting generated every year is probably more than what's happened in the entire human life cycle, which means that if it's calendar year 21, the amount of data that's generated in this year is more than that's been generated right till end of last year, and that's the speed at which new data is coming in. Now, this data can sit anywhere. It can sit on the edge, on the core, on-prem, private cloud, public cloud, hybrid, and there are all of these new terms, which are getting generated. I think the key is that the data management world will get increasingly more complex because it's just that you have so much more data to handle. And unlike in the past, when it used to sit largely in the data centers, it can go sit in like multiple other platforms. With advent of stuff like 5G, it will only make the problem a little more complex. Now, I think what's important is how do we seamlessly manage this data without going through the pain or without having to figure out these multiple platforms. Also, I think the experience that a lot of enterprises have had on the cloud has been not to the same level as it's on-prem, and I think it's up to the tech world to go bridge that gap. And I fully agree with Pradeep when he said that at least in the financial services world and maybe in a few others as well, it's not going to be either or. It's not like the whole world is going to move to public cloud. On-prem is here to stay and will be there, which means that the new world is going to be around hybrid, and it's going to be that a whole lot of applications or workloads are going to be on-prem, whereas quite a few others could be on the cloud. And when you are living in a hybrid world, you want to manage your data as seamlessly as you can, without even figuring out that whether it sits on-prem or on the public cloud. And if you can go do that seamlessly, then from a IT practitioner standpoint, that just makes it life easier, takes away the pain or all the challenges that one gets. I think that's what the new world's going to look like.
I couldn't agree more. I think you hit it, and similar to what Pradeep has also been saying, that it's not a question of this being a supplementary product category. It's more a complementary product category. It's for us, and each individual organization will have slightly contextualized needs as to say, what do I keep on my data centers? What do I take on cloud? And finally, the whole idea is, especially for organizations whose core competence is not doing technology, right? And they're making cars, they're shooting movies, they're showing you content, they're discovering new medicines. For them, how do you simplify the complexity of handling this entire ecosystem? I think, and like I think Jeff Bezos says, right? Simple is difficult, and which is where I think we are all grappling to say, like you said, how do I, if I have a very hybrid or a multi environment, how do I manage it seamlessly, right? And I'm going to come back, Pradeep, because Puneet, because I would also like to get your views on what's the next new, because you have a bird's eye view of what's happening on both sides of the table, right? So, but I wanted to come to you, Chirag, for a moment. Chirag, you have been one of the leading lights when it comes to technology transformation in the real estate and the retail sectors. And it'd be interesting to hear from you on a couple of transformational success stories in these domains, because finally everything that we're doing is for businesses to be able to leverage all of this, right? And I thought, let's hear specifically from your domain. And also, do you think these evolving technologies have had a real impact here, Chirag?
Right. Thanks, Biswa. So, I mean, it's great to hear a relevant question from a from someone like me who's more of a transformation catalyst of sort. Normally, I wouldn't like to, pivot my conversation in and around big events like COVID, but, leave aside COVID, then GST, then demonetization. While the world had moved on from, love at first sight to love at swipe right, real estate industry as such, the tech adoption in the real estate industry was at the very superficial level. What these big events have done is that, they have actually brought this industry out of complacency. And innovation was inevitable any which ways. And, and then people like us, thrive on these opportunities because, you don't have to sell this now because it's imminent. The writing was on the wall. What these events have done is that, they have accelerated something which was pretty much on the radar, right? Which is being talked about. And a good example, which I keep quoting, two examples probably. One, which is more to do with, consumer facing activity, right from the time a consumer buys a property till the time they get the possession and from the time they live in a community. Now this entire experience was fragmented. When I say fragmented, you think of, what happens when you select a property, you do a booking, then you apply, then you do a co-applicant, then you do a KYC, then you have invoices, receipts, floor plans, milestones, statement of accounts, your project status update, snagging, possession. All these things were completely done on piece of paper or emails or probably WhatsApp in all, in at best. However, things were not supposed to, because with the advent of, there's new technologies which you brought out, Biswa, consumer like us had already experienced Ubers and Olas and Airbnbs of the world. And there was no way you could sell that fragmented solution to the millennials and Gen Zs of the world, right? So we actually had thought about, the entire experience. We used to call it seamless experience, but now we call it contactless experience to market it. But essentially, it's the same experience, right? From the time you buy the property, the entire experience, which is where I spoke about in, everything has been brought onto a single platform on a click of a mouse. You don't have to actually move an inch, and people are used to it. We don't have to sell this. We don't need to train them. The consumer training was not needed because it was all given for us, right? And it doesn't stop there. The community living actually continues from there on. Like, once you take the possession, you live in a community, you have too many deliveries. You have Zomatos, you have, Amazons, Flipkarts. So, everyone is pretty much part and parcel. You have maid management, you have parcel management, you have visitor management, your vehicle, everything has to be seamless. And this is what the technology does for us. And these things were, as I said, the writing was on the wall. All we had to do was to ride onto this wave of these events and actually create these experiences for our consumers. And people are unwilling to go back to the previous era at all now. And this is an example of transformation which has changed the way people used to consume or experience real estate, because real estate historically has been talked about that real estate is all about location, location, and location. Sadly, it's not true anymore. Innovation is bound to be there, and this probably is one of the examples of consumer facing. But that doesn't end. We have very briefly, without taking much of everyone's time, but as an example, even from an operational excellence perspective, traditionally, it is, at best, real estate industry or a commercial industry or a real estate retail companies, they were doing PPM, preventive maintenance, at best, right? But PPM is not good enough in these times because, it is kind of, while you do every quarter, you go and check the genset and HVACs of the world and see whether the gensets are heating up or vibrating, or you do your oiling and you come back. Is that enough? Absolutely no. Absolutely no. And the technology has evolved to such an extent. and I must tell you, we are happy to be pioneering doing this. That even before a critical asset like genset or HVAC actually falters, it actually starts drawing extra current. And once it draws extra current is when it starts heating up or vibrating more. And trust me, the technology today, what we have at our hands is actually capable of reading all of this at ease. And obviously with the help and with the advent of cheap servers, data centers, and and the ease of compute, we are able to corroborate this data along with the OEM provided data, and then pre-assess and pre-calculate, okay, this is potentially a problem which is brewing now, and we better act upon it now before you do PPM, before you do heating up of genset and vibration there. This is an example of data being leveraged to do things in a transformative way rather than doing in a calendar specific way. Back to you, Viswa.
Chirag, I really like it. Number one, I think the conviction and the enthusiasm is very apparent, right? And it's coming from an industry which is much vilified in terms of, even a couple of years ago, people would say, hey, what technology? So there are two techs, right? You have technology adoption to sell, which I think the sector did brilliantly well. So, social media, etc., using the electronic media brilliantly well to actually go out and sell. But technology to deliver was always something that the sector has maybe vilified on, saying, whether it's the customer experience, whether it's project monitoring, whether it's backend, all of it, right? But I think it is not only fast catching up, it is also leapfrogging a lot of other sectors in what's happening right now, right?
Sure.
Even in terms of today, I see startups doing some brilliant work in AI, even in just energy management of large complexes, facility management of large. And you guys have really taken this, and I can vouch for it firsthand because my office in Bangalore happens to be in one of your complexes, right? Whenever I'm in Bangalore, I just marvel. It's a brilliantly run space in terms of how you are even utilizing technology for somebody like me. I think one of the main things that a lot of us do not consciously realize is one of the greatest advantages of adopting all of this has just been the simple thing of visibility. And if I say this as a customer myself, right? This visibility. So think of this, right? Today, when you order on any of the food services, whether it's Swiggy, Zomato, etc., one of the biggest comfort is I know exactly what's happening to my food. I know it is being prepped, it's being picked up. He's in this signal of the blah blah blah. I know exactly how long it will take to get me. Right? Just that comfort of knowing what's happening to my product, whether it is in food, whether it is in real estate or anywhere else, right? Just that visibility of every moment, right, gives a client a lot of, so there's already automatic client comfort. I might not be happy with the food, but I will not have a problem with how it got to me, right? And I think that's one of the bigger advantages of what's happening there. But I'm going to come back to you, Pradeep. I wanted to quickly bring you in, right? HSBC has made this in large chunks, this move to cloud, right? So how did you go about the cloud strategy, right? That's one, right? And what is your take on the future of data centers versus cloud, right? I know you just touched upon the couple of minutes back, but maybe just stretch it out a little for us. You are on mute, Pradeep.
Yeah, so sometimes that's what cloud can't help fix, right? Human follies cannot be fixed for the cloud. But if you look back at the bank today, I mean, we're a fairly large financial services out, probably one of the largest banks in the world. So the scale is big, and that scale leads to complexity, right? So there's 40 million customers, 64 countries we operate, and so on. Now, what this has meant is over a period of time, the application footprint that has been required to support our businesses have gone complex. Now, bringing something as revolutionary as cloud was never going to be an overnight affair. I like what Chirag was mentioning, saying that I'm sure Chirag also realized, and the real estate industry and Embassy is a big player there, they've realized that it's not so much about technology, which is sometimes the easier part, but doing change management when it comes to behavioral changes. And I think Puneet alluded to that too. It's about how do you ensure that the experience that you want to provide is exactly what the customer wants, and how does it all play out. So the human talent base is a very important factor there. When we started getting into cloud as a large organization, we realized it was never going to be, like I said, not an overnight affair. So there are multiple prongs, right? We've got to get the people right. We've got to get the regulatory framework right, because you've got to ensure, and with that regulatory framework comes privacy, security, everything, statutory norms that you need to comply with, and so on. And then, of course, you've also got to get the business case and the investments right? You don't want to burn yourself by going at the cloud is something that you can easily go ahead and invest a lot of money in. And before you know, it can just go on, right? So we've got to get all those things right. We've got to be prudent about it. So if I were to just attempt the thought, and I hope I do justice to it, back in about 3 or 4 years ago, roughly, we established baseline capabilities across all the 3 cloud models. What was going to be public for us, what was going to be private, what was going to be hybrid. We focus on understanding and addressing risks in each of these models, right? What, like I was saying, data security and regulation, as you know, are top priorities for a bank, right? That's pretty important for us. So we upskilled our engineers to be able to exploit the whole potential. On public cloud, we did not really go with one model. So we went with all the 4 big ones, right? We went with GCP, AWS, Azure, and Ali. Again, very clear use cases on when we go with what. So there was internal frameworks established as to what's the right thing and why it's the right thing, right? And again, getting the whole organization in step behind that vision. Even during these initial adoption phases, we started seeing some benefits of scalability. So certain quick returns that we got, speed of deployment in the initial set of applications that we modernized towards cloud, meant that our end customer, again, very similar to what Chirag was saying, meant that the end customer benefited from that seamless experience. Seamless experience is something that all of us grapple with, right? Ensure that our customers, whether it be a NetApp customer, whether it be a customer for embassy, we ensure that when they deal with us, that it's very easy for them, right? Difficult for us and easy for our customers. So that is the holy grail that we're trying to pursue. So that helped. And I think some of these, workloads and processes that really came out. Then the next phase, of course, was scaling for us. We're talking about a much wider range of applications, which we're looking at right now. We're trying to work to a plan, ensure that there is a certain cloud framework or a data on cloud reference architecture that we have, which we're going to work towards. And then, so that's how our journey has played out. And I know this question about data center versus cloud. Like I said, I would take the versus out. I think it's always going to be the data center and the cloud. I also admit that geopolitics in the world today also has an impact on how these things play out, right? So increasingly, the world is getting very conscious about what elements of data are stored in which data center in the world, and if it's compliant with the local data laws of that land, correct, which we have got to comply with. And I think eventually all strategy that we would, or for that matter, any large organization or corporate in the world would have to comply with that. And then cloud becomes, so that becomes the primary driver. We've got to be, otherwise, it's not the right way to do business unless you comply with that. And then the cloud framework or the cloud architecture plays in tandem with that. Will ensure that certain things, if it's PII data, will be hosted within the norms of PII data within the country and so on. So that's been our thinking on the matter, and we're good to hear from others as to how you see this world evolving.
So Pradeep, I believe that at some point of time, right, the distinction in capabilities that you buy into when you go on a public cloud or you go into a data center will slowly start vanishing, right? Having said that, so like you said, right, this is I call this an economy of convenience. I don't use Uber because they use superb technology. I use Uber because it's brilliantly convenient for me, right? I don't have to buy a car, maintain a car, driver, garage, parking, whatever, etc. I get it when I want it, and I get it at economy. And the whole idea of this is that my interface with the product or the service should be as simple as possible, which essentially means that the engine running behind it becomes much more and more complex, right? The simpler the front end becomes, the more complex the back end becomes, counterintuitively, unfortunately. And that's how it is. And therefore, as businesses, I think this debate, which has been raging for the past few years now, I see it dying away because it will be a non-topic in my view. What people will ask is not whether, cloud, data centers, they'll say, what is it giving me? How much is it costing me? Like you said, right? Cloud economics, which sometimes is an afterthought to a lot of large organizations when they realize that it's just blown up in their faces, right? And we're helping large financial organizations also, right? Who suddenly realize, oh my God, it's just draining money like no one's. And then, of course, there are ways of economizing there, right? If it's better if it's put in from first principle. So I will come back. I will come back and I'll talk briefly towards the end. I think where that world is going. But I wanted to go back to Puneet. Puneet, I know we've spoken about this, right? That you, Pradeep, and I hold very similar views on the future of this ecosystem. But I want to hear from you. What does your crystal ball say? How does NetApps look at it?
Yeah. Okay, Bisa. So, let me start with a little incident that happened, I think, almost 10 or 12 years back. And I was meeting the senior defense official, and this was more like a business meeting. And, I was asking him a little about the challenges that they face. And he made this interesting comment. He said, people think that wars are getting fought on the borders. And he said, wars are now going to be fought and what he called the cyber warfare. And probably that was still early days. I think the world that we are getting into is that data is going to become critical for nations. And nations could be competing with each other for data. And to the point that was made by Pradeep, that there are all of these geopolitical issues and it's showing up in different forms and shape. There are countries or a group of countries that are coming up with laws and a whole lot of regulations. So it looks like that data and this term that I heard in one of the NASCOM events about 4 or 5 years back, that data is the new oil, right? This statement keeps coming up in different forms and shape. So one thing is very evident, that data is going to be extremely important, powerful, will get leverage in different forms and shapes, whether it is enterprises, nations, or the defense forces, or like anybody else. So firstly, from the crystal ball, the significance that data assumes will go up exponentially. Second is what really constitutes data and where it is sitting. Now, there was this interesting point that came from Chirag, and he talked about the gensets. Now, there is data sitting in that genset. It's been there for quite some time. It's not like that data suddenly appeared. But 20 years back, it was in an analog form. Now with the new technology, it sits in a digital form. But still, that the data has never been leveraged. I think what the embassy group is doing with that data is really picking that data that's been there for years and figuring out at how you can do preventive and how you can do or how you can service your customer better. I think that's where the new world is going to. So is it like this new form of data that suddenly appeared? The answer is no. We are now recognizing that there is this stuff that is sitting all across, like I said, the edge or the core. And now I think enterprises are making decisions that which of it should be run on public cloud, which of it should be run on private cloud or on-prem, and where do you find the hybrid story. So I think that's what the other future is going to look like. One other point that I'll quickly allude to, and this came from Pradeep when he said about cloud economics. Cloud is no different from a utility in a way. And I think way back when electricity was scarce in India, or at least in the time when I was growing up, we would never get electricity 24 hours a day. And when we started getting, our electricity bill started shooting up. And in those days, when affordability still wasn't as much as it is today, if you had a high electricity bill, it would be a cause of concern. I think on the cloud side as well, I have known enterprises who suddenly got a cloud bill and said, "Oh, I never thought that I would get a bill so high." And it's not for a wrong reason. It's just that when you get used to it, you start consuming it and you enjoy it, and more and more users go, and you don't even know who are all the people who are consuming. So now the tech world is coming with a view which says, how can you optimize resources for the enterprises without impacting deliverables and still bring the bill down? And if the tech world can do this, then we are allowing a whole lot of large corporations who are big users of the cloud to do more with less, right? And that anyway seems to be the norm of the day, given all the pandemic. Everybody's short on resources. Everybody's saying, how do I deliver more with, using either less money or, with less resources? So I think that's a third story that's going to be, how do you do more with less in a world that's going to be ever so more demanding on data and what you can do quickly. So I think those are the few quick thoughts. Back to you, Biswa.
I think a couple of things that you said really struck a point. So what, 1947, 48, I don't remember, right? That's the first time Alan Turing actually published a paper about machine intelligence and machine learning, right? In different words. And for I think 60 odd years, what happened? Nothing much, right? So the knowledge was there. It was only in large academics, large government institutions which were doing some amount of R&D, I think. What happened is our ability to store more and more data at cheaper and cheaper cost, right? Our ability to process, the computer that landed man on the moon, the Apollo guidance computer system. I think if I remember right, it had some 32 MB of processing power. Just think of this, right? The iPhone 12 or whatever is the new one, 13, 14, whatever it is, I think we'll have a zillion times more processing power than the computer that landed mankind on moon. And that's the sort of processing power we're talking in everybody's hands. And which is the reason suddenly it has become accessible in the last half a decade. Very honestly, last half a decade, for everybody, small businesses, large businesses, to go out there and harness this. But now the problem is, I think for us, people who are actually involved in visioning and building these platforms in which all of this is done, because I believe, so data is like Gajar. I don't know, all Indians, all of us will understand, right? Everybody from my apartment goes out to the same supermarket, which is right outside my apartment block, right? And buys carrots, right? But when we come home, maybe in my house, what it's being made into is Gajar ka halwa. Next door, somebody is making kanji, and I don't know if you guys know kanji, this very sour thingy, right? Or maybe somebody downstairs making achar out of it. Somebody next door is having carrot cake or vishishwa, carrot soup, etc. The core ingredient is the same, comes from the same place, but the actual product for consumption is drastically different, right? And I think that is how. So our job is to ensure that this platform that we're building, whether it is on crowd, hybrid, multi, doesn't matter, right? Like you said, it allows people to be able to make the kanji, the gajar ka halwa, the etc. And one of the main problems there that we keep talking about hardware and software, right? I don't think we talk enough about the wetware. Us humans, 80%, whatever X% water, and therefore I tend to call us wetware, right? Which is the human capital that really makes all of this work. And Puneet, while we have spoken about this before, I think as an overall industry, not just in India, globally, we are going through this massive talent crunch in this entire space. Puneet, I wanted to quickly bring you in on this, and then I'll come to Chirag.
Yes, I think you're absolutely right. And this talent crunch is coming largely from the global demand that's happening on digital transformation, which is also accelerated by the pandemic. From whatever we hear from the analysts and a whole lot of other folks, I don't think so this is going away in the near future. And I know, we read in the press that a whole lot of IT services companies are hiring tens of thousands of fresh graduates from college. They'll bring them in, train them, skill them up. They'll probably reskill a whole lot of their folks and so on. I think in this whole story, it will also lead to a lot of acceleration on the public cloud, because public cloud also shifts some of that services management that enterprises do in-house to somebody else and going and doing it. And I'm not talking about their specific domain, but just the basics, right? Your system admins, your OS management, your backup story, right? All the basic ID functions. So I think that for one is definitely going to happen. The second also is the fact that the nature of skills will also change very significantly. In fact, they've changed very significantly in the last 4 or 5 years. I think a lot of companies can manage their tech crunch if they are effectively able to reskill. And folks who have followed NASSCOM will know that one of the biggest challenges that NASSCOM was grappling with is how do you accelerate this whole reskilling program? And then we all had this perception of, and I use the word perception very deliberately, that at what age are you in, right? So people had this perception if folks are above a certain age, that much more difficult to reskill, the whole term around millennials and other stuff. But in my view, it really doesn't matter. I mean, if organizations are able to reskill their employees, then their whole talent crunch will come down. The third that I can add, and that's my last, that this whole notion of an employee working for specific hours and working for more than one employer, I think that's something that we will also start seeing. This view about having full-time employees and folks doing all of that work. And I've heard in the very recent past that there are people who are going and telling their prospective employees that I'm going to work for 2 of them, but I will make sure that I go finish what you're asking me to do. So skills as a metered offering, right, is also something that could come in place. So in my view, we'll see interesting times ahead.
I agree. Pradeep, I know that I've just been given a time check. So Pradeep, quickly, 2 minutes on possibly this being the largest hurdle we have to exponential adoption, right? This entire talent crunch. I know you have a very strong view on this. HSBC has a very strong view on this. Quick 2 minutes, Pradeep, from you.
Yeah, I mean, I think I align with Puneet on everything that he mentioned. I don't see it any differently. Very simple. I do think that we have a crunch. I think over the years we've significantly grown upskilling avenues. There's no point really fighting the talent crunch. I think you've got to adapt around the talent crunch, which is the approach that we and probably most of our peer organizations have taken, which is that, okay, it is what it is. I mean, right now there's a huge demand for digital skills and cloud being key amongst them. So what we're trying to do is, of course, come back with our own in-skill, within organizations, skilling bases, instructor-led trainings, do self-paced, encourage our employees to earn industry certification, support them during that practice, come up with our own dedicated cloud practices, upskilling programs, and so on. So that's been our take on it. It'll work. I think in net for us, we've just accepted the talent crunch as the cost of doing business in a way, and we just adapt around it.
I think that's the brilliant way of both working at it and articulating. I think as organizations having to adapt to what the reality is, because an organization like yours or mine right now has probably 3 different generational thinking people working for it, right? And all of us we were born in different generations, and nowadays the generation gap is what, 7-8 years, I think. 9-10 years maximum in terms of thinking. And the reality is that gig economy is going to be here for a while, right? Especially with the thing that, and therefore we have to adapt to how you can't have a one-shoe-fits-all strategy for your talent anymore, right? You'll have to diversify that. Chirag, quickly to you, in the real estate sector and to you personally, what is exciting you in terms of the future of data?
Sure. Okay. I'm no good in crystal gazing, but I think there is a tremendous opportunity. I probably started with the fact that 3 big events which has jolted this industry, which is GST, demonetization, and now COVID. I believe that innovation is inevitable, and there's huge amount of opportunity, whether it's smart city, whether it's operational excellence, or even for that matter, employee experience. I mean, there is always an opportunity to completely transform the way we have been traditionally operating, I'm presuming that government is also going to be supportive of what we are trying to do, rather than, because I believe that government is taking nimble steps towards digitization. And I think this is one area, one segment, one domain where we still need sizable change, and it's probably because it's more state driven. But I think opportunity is huge if if we get support. It can become Uber and Zomatos of the world, where we can transact at ease, and without any hesitation with the new technologies which are there on the anvil, whether it's mobile tech or blockchain for security, or a public ledger of sort. But invariably, this has a potential to completely retransform, or probably reimagine the real estate industry as such, with the help of with the advent of these technologies.
Chirag, I couldn't agree more. I think the real proof of any technology aspect is when it works at the bottom of the Maslow's hierarchy, right? When Absolutely. It is impacting what really matters, roti kapda makan, right? When it's impacting that, I think that's when a technology is for the greater good, not just when you're looking at people in the middle and the top of the hierarchy. And buying a house is, for most people, is still one of the largest personal financial decisions they'll ever make, right? And therefore, it's imperative that we start there. I think I have really enjoyed this conversation, right? And what I really like is this whole idea of the data fabric. I don't know if there's this gentleman called Ed Tittle. He writes about this data fabric thing, where all these streams of these various types of data make up sort of the weft of the fabric, and the controls and the tools and the platforms make up the weave to finally make this beautiful tapestry of information and insights, right? And I think that's what all of us are talking about. You want to be able to use the data. You need to be able to collect, interpret, and act on however it is. And therefore, you have to choose how you do it, what platforms you do it. I seem to get a lot of my talking points from memes, surprisingly, nowadays, right? And somebody sent me this one recently, which I really like. When when God was asked, now that water has been made essential to humans, what is your plan to distribute, supply this to every corner of earth? And God said, I've been thinking of a cloud-based system, right? And Abhijit Verma, a very leading thinker and a good friend, says, come hell or high water, thou shalt cloud. And if thou clouds, thou shalt hybrid cloud or multi-cloud, right? And I also keep to that. I think that's where it's going to be in the future. Puneet, Pradeep, Chirag, I had a fabulous conversation. Thank you so much. Hopefully, in the very near future, we will be doing this in a physical room, right? Augmented by a couple of beverages, coffee. I mean, who are we kidding? It's never going to be coffee, is it? But hopefully we'll see each other very soon, right? Whenever that is. It's been a pleasure speaking to you. We'll talk again. Isha, thank you so much for having us here. Back to you, Isha.